To expand on this, we're joined now by SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. How significant is such a conversation, given, of course, what happened after the elections and President Ramaphosa's re-election as president?
Well, I think this is quite important, as you know, that after it was clear that there's no party that has been able to get an absolute majority, 50+1, to form a government, many countries were not able to be specific in their messages because they were waiting to see the formation of government and who is going to be at the helm of that government. But after the inauguration, we saw messages pouring in, congratulating President Ramaphosa, particularly from the developed South and also some countries in the developed North. So this telephone call is quite important because it's not just a hard message, but they were able to talk. No matter how short the conversation was, but at least there was a conversation. And you can see based on the outcome that they didn't only just focus on congratulating South Africa, but they also spoke about a way forward. Yesterday, when I spoke to the ambassador of the U.S. to South Africa, he pointed out that America stands firm in terms of making a commitment to continue to work with South Africa on different levels, particularly on trade and investment, and also congratulating the new Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, who is now the counterpart of Antony Blinken. And today now, the two heads of states talking, it speaks to how the United States of America and the North in general, the developed North, still value the relationship and the role of South Africa at the global level. And therefore, I think this is one of another signal that much as in the country you see this to and fro and contestation in terms of particularly the economic hub, Gauteng, but the global community has accepted that South Africans have spoken and everything is still under control because there's peace and people are continuing with what they are supposed to do while the politicians are trying to find a solution. So this is a vote of no confidence, not to the president only, but also to the country and to the continent in general.
What would you say are some of the prominent issues as we take a look at SA and US relations that the leaders could perhaps at this stage perhaps agree to disagree on as those matters are escalating behind the scenes?
Let's start with trade and investment. You know that there was a whole view around AGOA, whether South Africa should be included when the renewal process kicks in. And we saw the administration of Joe Biden determined to do that, even though there were some congressmen and senators who wanted South Africa to be excluded. Therefore, I think talking about trade and investment and commitment to strengthen the relations will include that. The other important issue is that you know that South Africa has been very vocal on what's happening in the Middle East. And therefore, when South Africa and the U.S. are talking, they can also assist in trying to ensure that the two parties in the Middle East, Palestine and Hamas and also Israel, do find one another so that there can be a peace process. The other issue is the Ukraine matter. You know that the president was leading the Africa Peace Initiative, and therefore now that he's back again, he can continue with that. So it is important to engage with countries such as the U.S. who are very firm on supporting Ukraine, while South Africa is looking at the middle ground to ensure that both Ukraine and Russia are able to find a lasting solution to this war in Ukraine. And also you know that in health, the PEPFAR, there are programs that America is supporting, and therefore you expect America to continue. You have trade and investment bilateral agreements, not necessarily AGOA, where South Africa is continuing to work with the United States of America, particularly in the motor industry sector, and therefore you would want to see that kind of relationship continuing, and therefore them talking does open or pave way. For example, the Minister of International Relations and the Secretary of State of the United States of America to take the discussions to a particular level. On the other hand, the new Minister of Trade in South Africa to engage with the Secretary of Trade in the U.S. so that they can really iron out the trade issues among the two countries. And the other important issue, you know that this year, one South-South member country, and the very same country is a member of BRICS and has good relationship with South Africa, Brazil, will be hosting the G20 summit. So we expect the president and some ministers in the economic cluster, including the new Minister of International Relations, to later this year travel to Brazil to attend that G20, which is now G20+1, because they have also admitted AU as member of the G20 to meet with these developed North countries and some developed South-South or developing South-South. And also next year, South Africa will be hosting the G20 meeting. So heads of state and government of the G20 countries will be descending to South Africa next year. And you expect the leader of the United States of America to be here. And the other issue to note in relation to G20 is that America in 2026 will be hosting the G20 summit. Therefore, in 2025, when we are hosting G20, we are chairing G20, America will be the incoming while Brazil outgoing. And therefore, the relationship between these two countries is quite important, particularly for handing over from 2025 to 2026, that is the United States of America. So that relationship is quite important. But the thorny issue is that the U.S. is going to elections in November. Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen. But much as a country is facing elections, you don't stop in terms of diplomacy. You continue to communicate, because whether there's a new leadership, that leadership will have to continue to prepare for the G20 in South Africa, but also for the G20 in the U.S. in 2026. The only snag for me is that if it is Donald Trump who is going to win the election, you know his stance in relation to Africa. And he never visited Africa during his tenure, and he had no interest, and therefore that might be a problem. But it looks like Joe Biden is confident that he is coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for weighing in there. SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena just speaking there about the SA-US relations as the two heads of states speak telephonically as they speak about the importance of strengthening their ties.